React 19 went stable few months ago, and you might be thinking now if it's a good time to upgrade. Many updates in React 19 are related to the server-side rendering, but what if you're not using it at all? Does it really worth spending your time and migrate to a newer version of React when the old one is still fine? Yes, React 19 is not that groundbreaking as React 16, where hooks were introduced. They changed a lot in the React ecosystem. But still, React 19 offers few improvements that can make your life easier and save you the effort of writing extra code. And in this video, I'm going to give you a quick overview of React features that made me to refactor my personal project to React 19. And if you watch this video till the end, you may want to do it as well. So let's get started. And the first and the most important change, at least for me, is that we can finally get rid of all the code that is related to memoization. Use callback, use memo, and other stuff that you don't need anymore, because compiler can do it for you, and it will do it for you better than you would do it yourself. The problem with these hooks is that many of us developers don't really know how to use them right. So people end up adding memoizations here and there just in case, even if they don't really need it. And missing dependencies for these hooks could create some sneaky bugs when application just does not update when it should be updated. Well, that's annoying, isn't it? Now we can finally forget about memoization, and I'm just delighted to strip out all these hooks from my code. And another thing we can get rid of now is forward ref. Before we had to use it when we wanted to pass a ref to a function component. But now we can finally pass refs just as normal props. And another one for refs. Now they support cleanup functions. It means that you can add a callback function that will be called when the component is unmounted. It's useful because now you can directly unsubscribe from the listeners, disconnect observers or clear timers without any extra boilerplate code. And another thing in your code you could shorten now is context. Now you can just render context instead of context.provider. And the last thing you could get rid of with React 19 is all these CSS and JS libraries. Because React 19 supports style sheets for both client-side and server-side components. Now you can keep styles together with your components, and React will take care of everything else. You can tell React in which order you want to render your styles, and also you can make sure that the styles will be added before revealing the content that depends on these styles. They not just removed some annoying stuff, but also added some cool new features. And a lot of them are related to forms and data fetching. It became much easier to handle some common cases related to the forms, getting data and mutating it. React now supports passing a function to the action of the form that makes it much more intuitive to work with forms. They introduced a special hook for it, useActionState, that handles request, response and state of the form. You can pass the function that should be called when the form is submitted and the initial value. And the hook will return an array of 3 elements. First, it would be the actual state of the action, and if it is the first render, then it would be your initial state, and if not, then it would be the actual value that function returns. And the second one is the actual action, the function that you can pass to the action of your form or to the form action prop of any button inside the form. And the third value of this array is the isPendingState, the state that tells you that the response is still pending or if it is already done. You can use it to disable the submit button, for example, or show some kind of a loading state on your page. So now, instead of few use state hooks, you can handle everything in one use action state hook, and that's just make it so much nicer. And another hook that makes our life easier when it comes to the forms is use form status. This hook comes really handy when you want, for example, to change the style of your submit button in the form while the response is still in progress. And in this case, in like normal scenario in all versions of React, you would have to pass your isPending state down through the components to the button. And it could be multiple levels, so you would probably do some awful prop drilling. But now, instead, you can just use form state hook right in the button component, and it will return you the state of its parent hook. It makes it really easy to encapsulate your logic, and you can reuse the same button component with the same hook in different forms without any extra code or props. And the last but not least, use optimistic hook. When you perform data mutation, you may want to give users some immediate feedback instead of waiting for the response to be finished, to make UI feel faster and more responsive. For example, when users submit a message to the chat, you want to show the message immediately, and then when you get the actual response from the server, you can just change the status to the delivered. And use optimistic hook can help us with this. So this hook looks a lot like use state hook, and it returns you an array of two elements, the value and the setter. And you use the setter to update the optimistic value, but you may ask what will happen if the request fails and there is an error. Well, unfortunately, you still have to do some manual error handling and revert the optimistic value back if the request wasn't successful. And of course, this approach is not universal. You should use optimistic hook only in the applications that should be highly responsive. For example, some real-time apps or like chats or voting, whatever requires some immediate feedback for the user. And for other cases that are heavily relied on the result of the response, you should use traditional so-called pessimistic approach, where you still have to wait for the result to be returned. And another exciting feature, the use API, changes the way we handle data in React components. There are two use cases for this API. First is fetching data with promises, and in this case, use API just replaces the use effect hook that we traditionally use for any API requests and side effects. And the second use case is getting data from the context, and here this API replaces the use context hook, so it's kind of two in one. So first, let's take a look at the use case with promises. First, you need to create a function that returns a promise, and then you pass this function to the use API, and it will return you the value that promise is resolved to for both success or fail scenarios. But there is an important thing here. The promise should be created outside of the component, because if you create a promise in the runtime, it will result in an error. So now we can also get rid of the use effects and make our code more readable and elegant. And it works similar with the context. Just pass the context to the use, and it will return you the value from the closest provider above for this particular context. And even though it doesn't change much in terms of functionality, it just gives us the nicer way to get the value. So these are the functions that seem most exciting and most useful for me in React 19. But that's not all of them. There are a bunch of changes related to the server-side rendering, and I'm not covering them in this video. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments below if you already had a chance to try React 19, or maybe you already migrated to it and using it in your projects. Let me know what's your impressions and which of the new features you like the most. And of course, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for my channel for more front-end news.